Getting a grip on e-commerce pricing power is the topic of my conversation today with Deanna Kaufman. She is Vice President with enVista. Hi, Deanna.
Hi, good morning, Bob. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining me. Now, as you know, shipping costs have absolutely exploded for retailers, especially when it comes to the e-commerce sales channel.
Right.
With that in mind, where is the pricing power in the marketplace now as COVID-19 is supposedly abating?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question, Bob. You know, when we think about what happened early on in the pandemic, everybody hankered down, and there was the thought process that, you know, just the world was going to stop spinning. And instead, what did people do is they kind of did what they did in a lot of crises, is they cocooned, and they took all the discretionary money and they just started to do things like purchasing. So what has really happened now that the pandemic is abating and people are returning more to normal is a lot more of those dollars are being spent on travel and on eating out experiences versus purchasing. Right. So I think the good news for retailers right now is that the pricing power is not quite back in their corner, and it was for many years. I like to think of this as the revenge of the carriers. Was the pandemic period where they enacted a lot of policies around pricing, penalties around late payments, and those types of levers that they could push and pull so that they can improve their profitability. But now that the demand for online purchases has now started to shrink as people are taking those discretionary dollars and traveling and eating out, is the volumes are beginning to change, the volume characteristics. So it's not quite yet where retailers probably want it to see. But one of the things that we've seen from a strategic sourcing perspective is that there's more power now than there was 6 months ago for retailers, and we expect that to keep continuing.
Capacity is always a big determinant of who holds the power in pricing.
That's correct.
I would imagine the transportation capacity is still a little bit difficult to obtain. Therefore, pricing remains in the hands of the carriers to a certain extent because of that. Is that the case?
That's correct. When you look at long distance hauls, anything in air freight, ocean freight, those are still constrained. I recently saw a visual of the ports in Shanghai, and all you see are little blips of shipping.
Yeah, well, we saw that off
Right.
our own shores in Southern California
Right,
for
exactly.
months and months.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think it's still constrained where it comes to long haul. You have goods that were ordered sometime last year, only now arriving.
Oh, wow.
So it will be a problem for retailers to deal with inventory, but eventually the transportation costs will abate. And you know, it's one of those ongoing problems that we see in supply chain, right? We talk about the bullwhip effect, right? So for all of those folks, who have to dust off their supply chain education, this is the bullwhip effect, magnified. And
Right.
so I think what you're going to see is that a lot of retailers will have to bleed off inventory. They may have inventory that's out of season. They're going to have to bleed that off. And they're going to be purchasing, but they're going to be more judicious about purchasing. So probably inventory is one of the biggest concerns that retailers are facing right now, less so transportation costs as the e-commerce shipments are starting to abate somewhat.
But transportation is still a huge portion of the cost of goods sold
Always.
for e-commerce orders. So
Yes.
how can retailers better manage their transportation spend?
Yeah, so there are different ideas that I have about how they can better manage it, but I think the number one thing that retailers should be looking at is what I think of as total cost of ownership. Do they really understand everything about their transportation? And what we often find when we work with retailers is that transportation can almost be just this big line item, this amalgamous blob of
Just called transportation. That's
which generally speaking, and you probably know this from the supply chain perspective, supply chain costs are generally 6 to 10% of overall revenue. So it can be an enormous number. But you have to break that down all the way down to where you're really understanding it from the cost of goods sold almost to the unit level to really understand it. So the first question that I would always ask a retailer is, do you really understand your transportation cost to the unit level so that you can start adjusting your pricing and your profitability models so that you can increase your profits and balance that so that, on par, you're profitable and you're reducing your overall operating margin.
In that case, you're asking for the transportation procurement person to play a much larger, more important role in the organization.
And finance.
Yes, and finance, as opposed to simply just going out purchasing transportation
That's
and saying,
right.
here's what it costs.
Yeah,
We're
and
a
then
cost center, not a profit center.
That's right. And then saying to the transportation leaders, here you go, good luck with the contract.
Yeah.
And you manage it. The other types of things that retailers can do is really understanding the entire network dynamic, right? And a lot of retailers are turning to data analytics and science to get a lot closer to understanding purchasing patterns, where goods need to be distributed from, forward stocking locations, leveraging stores if they have a store network, and also really trading off the cost to serve versus what is the service level agreement that they've made with their shopper. You know, there's a lot of fear, and there has been for a lot of years, around the Amazon effect.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of thought that, well, gee, Amazon's offering 2-day free, I need to be on par. Well, I would almost challenge that assumption. And I also ask retailers to tell me what really is the service level agreement and expectation that your shopper has. A lot of shoppers, actually, if you want to flip the script, is if you rethink about it, is that shoppers actually want something typically on a given day or time frame. It's not that they have to have it generically in 2 days. As a matter of fact, I've been holding off on a very large electronics purchase because the day that the communications company is offering to deliver my product is tomorrow when I'm flying home. And I don't want a large dollar value item sitting on my doorstep.
Yeah.
So I'm delaying my purchase intentionally, but they don't give me the choice. If I could have told them, I don't want you to deliver that till Thursday, I would have bought that already.
Interesting. Okay, well, it's interesting you should mention data analytics and data science. Do you have any data use cases that you could cite that would help to kind of dramatize what you're talking about here specifically?
Oh, yes, tremendously. So when we model retailers' supply chains and we take in all of their transportation data, we're looking at it from all modes. So whether that's air or ocean forwarding, LTL truckload, or parcel shipping, we take all of that information in and we put it into business intelligence type tools. And we do that on purpose because once you can have command of the aggregate, now you can start to make it work for you, right? So you can start to look at call outs. For example, the trade-off that I said about time to serve, or in transportation, it's always about managing the tail, right? So if you only have one distribution center in the center of the country, your problem will always be, how do you get to the extreme Pac Northwest, which by ground is only going to be maybe 3 to 4 days. To the tip of Florida, it'll be another 3 to 4 days. So if your service level agreement with your customers is 2 days, you're going to have to manage the tail probably by flying that, right? But so the question becomes is that what is your average transit days to those zones? Those are the types of call outs that you can make, and you don't have to rely on the carriers to tell you that, because the carriers are going to tell you something that's to some extent self-serving.
Right.
So it's in the retailer's best interest to really get a grip on everything from a data science perspective, everything that they can know to the order level, the unit level, all of the GL coding, all of the unit level dynamics. Make sure that they understand everything about that shipment, all the shipment characteristics, weight, did you get an accessorial, an oversized charge, or what's the average transit distance, time, and come up with all of that so that you can massage and improve your supply chain.
Thereby ensuring that your service level agreement goes along with reality.
That's
reflects the real world,
right,
as opposed to being just a theoretical thing that cannot be met because of the situation.
Exactly, because there's always going to be a trade-off between costs and customer lifetime value, right? And when we think about retail, it's really about customer lifetime value.
Yeah.
So is the customer completely satisfied so that they would buy from you again? That's the real question.
Very interesting. Deanna Kaufman, thank you for helping us to understand this whole idea of where is the pricing power today and how can retailers get a grip on it.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate that, but I want to ask you just briefly to tell me a little bit about enVista today. Where do you guys fit into the picture and what are you up to?
That's a great question, Bob. Thanks for asking. So enVista is a supply chain technology and consulting company. So we actually look at a customer's supply chain end to end, and we look at both the physical and digital aspects of it for commerce. So we have network analytics, consulting, technology, OMS solutions, and as it so happens, transportation. So very involved with transportation, and a lot of the data analytics we talked about earlier are certainly things that enVista can provide.
Good. You're playing an important role then. Thank you so much.
All
Deanna
right.
Kaufman, I really appreciate you sitting down with me to talk about these essential issues of pricing power and a little bit about enVista as well.
All right.
Thanks for being with me today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
I've been speaking with Deanna Kaufman of enVista. Thank you very much for watching.